As I said, Jim made me preach on this topic, and I'm glad he did. It's quite a topic, free will, and having spent the week considering it, Jim, I'm afraid I have no answers, but we're going to give it a shot. The first story that I covered as a 21-year-old journalist was the quadruple murder of a young mother, her two children, and a family friend. Robert Bassett was the name of the man who killed them. The four had been missing for weeks, and in the newsroom we had been tracking the case. When the police one morning began chattering over the scanners about something big in Waynesville, which was a rural community just a few minutes up the road from the newsroom, called everyone available there, I jumped in my car and I sped there too. The police loaded all of us journalists with our notepads and the TV journalists with their TV cameras into a hay wagon and a tractor, pulled us back to the banks of Salt Creek to show us four shallow graves. Some scenes are impossible to erase from memory. Over the months to come, I followed Robert Bassett's case up to his eventual sentencing to 4 life terms without the possibility of parole. I felt I came to know his victims, and I wanted Bassett to pay for what he had done. It was hard for me to imagine a punishment that would have been too harsh. My desire to see him punished was based on my belief that he had, out of his free will, chosen among many other options to murder this family. The truth is, we need to believe that people like Robert Bassett choose from their free will to do what they do. Sam Harris has written in his book titled Free Will, without free will, sinners and criminals would be nothing more than poorly calibrated clockwork. And any conception of justice that emphasized punishing them rather than deterring, rehabilitating, or merely containing them would appear utterly incongruous. And those of us who work hard and follow the rules would not deserve our success in any deep sense. It's not an accident, he concludes, that most people find these conclusions abhorrent. The stakes are high. Free will is the assumption of our justice system. The judges in the 1978 case, United States versus Grayson, said as much. They called free will a, quote, universal and persistent foundation of the way we deliver justice in America. But free will has fingers in more than just our justice system. Religion also thinks a great deal about free will. Some faiths, like the evangelical Christian faith that I grew up in, depend on the assumption of the freedom of the human will. We used to sing the American gospel hymn, Softly and Tenderly. Does anybody know Softly and Tenderly? Yeah, some of you do. We could sing it together now. Here we go. Okay, all right, let's do it. Softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling, calling for you and for me. See on the portals, he's watching and waiting, watching for you and for me. Do you know the chorus? Come home. You do. Come home, ye who are weary, come home. Earnestly, tenderly, Jesus is calling, calling, O sinner, come home. You're good. Well, can't you almost see the Savior of the universe waiting patiently for human beings to exercise their free will? Come home. Can't compel, but come home. We're not that different, we Unitarian Universalists. Our faith is also built in large part on the assumption of free will. I said last week that both Unitarianism and Universalism formed in early America as counters to a Calvinist faith that preached that God not only created every person, but knew before they were born the results of their lives. So Jonathan Edwards famously preached that humans are like spiders crawling across a tattered dishcloth that God is holding over the flames of hell. And that at any point, this is you, at any point, God could pop that dishcloth and send us careening into hell. This God knew before a person's birth whether that person would wind up in heaven or hell. That's a sort of literalist view of predestination. The early Universalists were appalled at that notion, sickened by the idea that God could choose some for hell and some for heaven, and not fooled, by the way, by the linguistic theological tricks that said, no, God chooses them for heaven but not for hell. Universalists preach that God's love extended to everyone, everywhere, no matter what, and that God's heaven would also include everyone. In the place of a God who predetermined everything from the spouse you would choose to the color of your shoes, both the Unitarians and the Universalists stress the freedom of human beings to create their own heaven and their own hell here on earth. The thought and theology of the early Unitarians was also deeply influenced by the Transcendentalists, people like Ralph Waldo Emerson, who famously talked about self-reliance in his essay bearing that title. The idea was that once again, in opposition to a God who predestines everything, if each of us could just tap into the connection to God and goodness inside us, we would need no outside influence to make the best choice possible every time. Goodness, they said, was the inherent human condition. Just listen to the still small voice inside, and you'll know what to do. Up through the period between the world wars, the cry of liberal faith was onward and upward forever. And I can't be all that critical. I said just last week, and I believe it's still this week, that we ought to spend more time in quiet, listening for the inner light in each of us. I really do believe human beings are born full of potential. But maybe we aren't always as free as we think. Maybe, in fact, free will as it is understood in pop culture is an illusion. Some pretty smart people think that might be the case. Einstein wrote, "Honestly, I cannot understand what people mean when they talk about the freedom of the human will. I have a feeling, for instance, that I will something or other, but what relation this has with freedom, I cannot understand at all. I feel that I will to light my pipe, and I do it, but how can I connect this up with the idea of freedom? What is behind the act of willing to light the pipe? Another act of willing?" And then he quotes Schopenhauer, "Man can do what he will, but man cannot will what he wills." Basically, Schopenhauer concluded that although we can do what we will to do, we can only will what is within our power and preferences to will. So free will is really an illusion. He said, "I am not free to choose that which does not come across my mind." Now, I know this to be true because I hate Brussels sprouts. Oh my, do I hate them. They taste to me like bad breath. I cannot, and I have tried, I cannot will myself to like them. Kelly doesn't know I'm going to pick on her. But every once in a while in the office, with no one else around, I pick up a whiff of death and decay. And I know immediately that Kelly is cooking Brussels sprouts. She likes them. The thought, hey, I should have some Brussels sprouts, never crosses my mind. Never. But it does cross hers. Free will is limited by many things, including our preferences. I don't much care that I am limited in this way. As Harris said, a puppet is free as long as he loves his strings. Einstein and Schopenhauer, though, weren't alone in challenging the popular notion of free will. Neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted an experiment in which he detected brain impulses, which he believed proved that the brain began moving a person toward an action milliseconds before the person consciously decided to take action. So in support of Einstein's thinking on the pipe, Libet's experiment, he said, and some people argue with him, he said proved that Einstein's impulse to light his pipe came not from some conscious decision on Einstein's part, but from a signal deep within Einstein's unconscious brain. Then, once the signal, which originated in the unconscious, became conscious, Einstein might say, I've just decided to light my pipe. But did he really decide to light his pipe? If you say yes, did he really decide to light his pipe? It's an infinite regress that ends in darkness, friends. I've spent all week here. Again, Sam Harris says it well. He says, you've not built your mind. And in moments when you seem to build it, when you make an effort to change yourself, to acquire knowledge, or to perfect a skill, the only tools at your disposal are those that you have inherited from moments past. And he invites us, take a moment, he writes, to think about the context in which your next decision will occur. You did not pick your parents or the time and place of your birth. You didn't choose your gender or most of your life experiences. You had no control whatsoever over your genome or the development of your brain. And now your brain is making choices on the basis of preferences and beliefs that have been hammered into it over a lifetime by your genes, your physical development since the moment you were conceived, and the interaction you've had with other people, events, and ideas. Where, he asks, is the freedom in this? Yes, you're free to do what you want even now, but where did your desires come from? I want to think that I have free will. Sometimes it kind of makes me a hero. I want to think that we all have free will. But it seems to me philosophy and science point me toward a slightly different reality. We have limited free will. Our free will, it seems to me, is limited by a lot of things that Sam Harris listed, including our circumstances. We are shaped by the systems into which we're born. Because of things like brain chemistry and upbringing, and we react differently to our environments than the people next to us. And we're born in a specific time period with a specific array of possibilities. Some things outside our array haven't been dreamed of yet. Certainly our wills are not completely free. But what difference does it make? I was talking to Heather, my wife, about this at a minister's retreat this past week. And I said, this is pretty disturbing, isn't it? And she, wisely as usual, said, actually, to me, it's freeing. And it is, isn't it? If we assume that we all have absolute free will, that we're all simply the product of either good or bad choices, we fuel the illusion of our separateness. We humans are not then all in the same boat. It becomes easy to judge people based on their position in society, their religious beliefs, their economic status. They're homeless because they've made poor choices, or they're wealthy because they've made good choices and are smart and good at business. But the knowledge that each of us is a product of a combination of free choices and circumstances and unconscious brain signals seems to me levels the playing field a bit. It's a reminder to be humble in our successes, which do not belong completely to us, to be gracious to those who need a hand up, and maybe to be a little more willing to reach without shame for that hand when life has us down. Now, believing our free will is limited doesn't imply we should just give up. Though I like the song, no que sera, sera here, it doesn't change everything, because frankly, whether or not Robert Bassett had free will and chose between an evening at the opera, a lecture on ethics, or committing a heinous crime, all of which were equally available to him, which is not the case, we still know it isn't safe to have that person walking the streets. Choices still matter, however and wherever they're initiated. And I believe we can change things in our lives once we do become conscious of them, limited though our choices are. Even if absolute free will is an illusion, and I think it is, each of us is presented with a certain array of choices and are charged to make the best of that array of choices. I think we get tripped up thinking about free will in the same place we get tripped up thinking about a lot of other things. We think it has to be one or the other, free will or no free will. But the world hardly ever works that way. We don't have completely free will. We're limited. But it seems to me neither are we simply victims of a totally random universe. We can do things to make a difference in our lives and in the world. So I say, let us remember that we share this human condition of limited free will. May this knowledge lead us to be a little more gentle with the failings in ourselves and the ones we love, and to work toward that gentleness in the wider world. Amen.